Most of the prime ministers of this country have been Christian. In fact, even the most recent prime ministers have been Christian in an anti-Christian time. John Howard, Tony Abbott, of course. Even Labor's Kevin Rudd used to call himself a Christian socialist and give press conferences outside his church. Now there's Scott Morrison, who's long been open about being a Pentecostal Christian. He's even prayed, successfully I've got to say, for an end to the drought.
Lord, we just pray for rain. That your rain will fall on this nation. Lord, that you'll restore those communities.
I was actually glad back then to hear Morrison say something that didn't sound like spin and made him sound very sincere. It was an insight into how he worked. And I thought, fair enough. But that said, even if I were a Christian, I would say it's bad theology to test God by asking for rain or for any other stroke of luck, like a win for your side or anything other than forgiveness, love and salvation. But Morrison has now been filmed telling an Australian Christian churches gathering about the prayers and the laying of hands he's done as Prime Minister and the signs he saw that he'd win the last election.
Been in evacuation centres where people thought I was just giving someone a hug and I was praying. And putting my hands on people in various places, laying hands on them and praying in various situations. I was just in Calgary where the cyclone has just gone through. Yeah. In all of those places, Wayne, you're right. I mean, it's been quite a time. It's been quite a time. And God has, I believe, been using us to, in those moments, to be able to provide some relief and comfort and just some reassurance.
Well, the ABC in particular has been stunned by all this, and the opposition leader this morning, Anthony Albanese, said he wasn't going to comment on Morrison's private faith, but he seemed to disapprove.
Faith is a personal matter. I respect people's own spiritual beliefs, but it's also important that we have a separation here of church and state. I think that the idea that God is on any politician's side is no more respectful than the idea that when someone's sporting team wins, it's because of divine intervention.
Now, the tape of Scott Morrison talking about his faith was circulated by the Rationalist Society. His president is Dr. Meredith Doig, a professional company director, former candidate for the Sex Party, and on the board of Dying with Dignity Victoria. Dr. Doig, why did you, thank you for coming on the show, why did you spread this video? What was it that you thought we should know about our Prime Minister?
I think you can see from the reaction that it's got, a lot of people have been very interested to see how Scott Morrison's beliefs, what Scott Morrison's beliefs are. And I think everybody will make their own judgment as to whether or not those beliefs actually marry up with the actions and the policies that he makes as Prime Minister.
Well, isn't your objection that he would let his faith influence him, but now you're saying we should actually marry his faith, match it against his deeds, and then criticise him if they don't follow?
No, what I'm saying is that people will make their own judgments about whether or not the positive things that he says, and if you listen to the speech, he speaks very eloquently, I think, about treating each individual as uniquely valuable and respecting each individual. He does say respecting Australians. He doesn't really say valuing anybody other than Australians, which is interesting in the light of what you were just speaking about before, Andrew, and the Australians who are perhaps of Indian background but stuck back in India. So I think people will make their own judgments as to whether or not what Scott Morrison says, which sometimes can seem very positive, but what he says and what he actually does in practice.
Yeah, but here again, I mean, if you're saying you don't want him in, you know, we shouldn't have religion in politics, but if he doesn't do what his faith would, to you, suggest he do, then he should be criticised. I think, isn't that evidence that he is operating much as we would hope, acting on evidence and reason rather than motivated solely by his faith?
Well, we don't really know, and this is one of the reasons why we shared the video, because I think people do need to get to understand what his private views and values really are, and then they're in a better position to be able to make their own judgments. I mean, as you mentioned in your introduction, Kevin Rudd was very open about his faith. He held media conferences on the steps of his church, so it wasn't a surprise when he spoke about his faith. But Scott Morrison seems to not want to have media open to speeches that he makes, like the one that he did at the conference.
Well, probably because people then pile into him, as I've heard on the ABC most of the day, and I've seen Father Rob Bowers and all that, and all that.
Yeah.
But what is wrong with Morrison praying for good things for Australia, for hugging them and praying for them, and praying even for rain to come for the farmers? Exactly how is that bad?
I'm not saying that it's bad. I don't think it works, but I'm not saying that it's bad. In fact, we at the Rationalist Society, we're not anti-religious, but we are pro-secular. And I was very interested to hear your clip of Anthony Albanese making reference to a separation between church and state, something that the Labor Party hasn't been very high profile in doing in the past. So let's hope that he does that. But I think the main thing is that there's a lot of Australians who are really deeply uncomfortable with the degree of intertwining between religion and politics. So everybody is absolutely free to believe whatever they like in the privacy of their own minds. But it's where people who have a very strong belief in a particular style of Christianity, where that belief spills over into the public domain, I think that's where people are starting to feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, we could all inquire into everyone's motivations. Who knows what they are? The relevant thing is what they actually do. And then we debate the policy, whether you're motivated by Christianity or your upbringing or some bad thing that happened to you, or revenge or sexism or passion or whatever it is. That's hardly relevant. What's relevant is what actually you do.
That's true. And look at this government that has attempted over the last few years to bring in a religious discrimination bill, half of which is fine. We wouldn't object to it. We think that religion ought to be a ground upon which people should not discriminate. But the other half of the bill goes much, much further than that. It actually would give religious leaders a sword with which to harm the people that they don't agree with, rather than a shield to protect people from discrimination.
Well, that said, I think people I see most getting harmed are Christians being dragged into tribunals to explain their faith. I hardly see this. But anyway, look, Meredith Goy, thank you so much indeed for your time. I appreciate you coming on.
Andrew, thank you. We know that secular and non-religious viewpoints are very rarely invited onto programs, so thank you for inviting us.